Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the first podcast of 2025. We have a great show prepared for you today. With me is our mayor, Brian Tisdale. Brian, welcome to your first podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, tell us a little bit about your background for those that haven't quite met you yet.
Okay, so I've been on the city council since 2010. I've served as the mayor of Lake Elsinore for 4 times. I've lived in the city of Lake Elsinore since 1998. It's been a while. 1998, 22 years in the Marine Corps. I retired as a master sergeant, and I currently work for the Emergency Services the Emergency Management Department for Riverside County. My background in emergency management is I have a master's degree in Emergency Services Administration, and married. I have 2 kids. And I love Lake Elsinore.
That's amazing. Now, today's segment is really particular and revolves around what you know and what you've worked on for many years. You have a master's in this area. Today's segment is emergency preparedness and public safety and the importance that means to this community, especially because we've been it's been frequent since we've had these disasters, everything from the Holy Fire in 2018 to the Holy Floods and to the Super Bloom and more fires. And what do we know that as?
Well, we call it the 4 Fs. Yeah, so we've had it, fish kills, flowers, floods, and fires. So Lake Elsinore is in a unique sort of position here. We live in a beautiful area in Southern California surrounded by mountains and trees. And of course, California is known for its earthquakes and other things. So when you live in those areas, there are going to be disasters. And so that's why we're here today, is to really make sure that people understand what emergency response is all about, how to access resources if necessary, and to protect yourselves.
And that's a perfect segue to go ahead and introduce our guests today. Who are they?
Yeah, so we have 2 guests with us today. So we have Ralph Mesa. He is our emergency services manager. I've actually worked with Ralph for several years in the emergency management department. And then we have Captain Jim Rawls. He's our captain on the sheriff's department, but he is our police chief for the city of Lake Elsinore.
That's awesome. I've had the pleasure to work with Ralph too before I even became into working for a city or municipality. I used to talk to Ralph when things popped off in the Coachella Valley, and we kept in contact, and definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes down to this. So without further ado, Ralph, thank you for joining us today. Talk to us a little bit about the chaos and all the great stuff that happens, but I want to know a little bit about your background.
Thank you for having me here. So like I said, before 20 years in emergency management, started in Imperial County. And that's pretty much where I learned a lot about disasters, earthquakes, obviously, floods, microbursts, and then, got deployed to do recovery for EF5 tornadoes and hurricanes, and then came over to Riverside. And then that's when I learned about fires. Riverside County, worked at EMD, or Emergency Management Department, with Brian. And I just came over to the city where I learned about the Holy Flowers as well. So, and just outreaching, teaching the community about emergency preparedness along with staff as well within the city, and just keeping that foundation strong.
Well, we're going to be definitely talking more in depth in regards to all that great stuff. And also with us, we have Captain Jim Rawls. Captain, you are not a stranger to these podcasts. You've been on 1 or 2 of these, and we appreciate it. For those that haven't met you yet, tell us a little bit about your background, and also this area is really close to your heart.
Yes, it is. Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Jim Rawls. I'm a captain with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I've been a captain for about 2.5 years, but I've been with the department for over 28 years, coming up on 29 years. I've had various assignments in the jails, working different stations, working in investigations bureau from every level, from management on up. So I actually started here in Lake Elsinore as a brand new deputy coming out of the jail in late 99, early 2000. I spent about 7 years here as a deputy and as an investigator. So I know the area well. I kind of moved around a little bit after that and left for about 15 years, working various assignments, and then returned back about 5 years ago to Lake Elsinore as a lieutenant over the city of Lake Elsinore, managing that contract, and then actually took over as commander of the Lake Elsinore station about 2.5 years ago. So I've had various assignments. I've worked numerous floods, fires, from deputy on up to as a captain. So I've worked at all different levels.
That's amazing. Anything that comes into mind when it comes down to these gentlemen and their expertise?
Well, I think it's important to know that everybody has a role during an emergency response. And so if Ralph can talk about his role within the city and how that works.
So just, obviously keeping city staff prepared, ready to go, and training, exercise, and just keeping plans in place. We put plans in place just so we know exactly what we're going to do, and then we exercise them, with our training and whatnot. So we do have what we call a checklist or an emergency action plan, just making sure what we're going to do for every disaster, how we're going to respond, who we're going to call, and whatnot. So depending on the incident is what we're ready and geared up for. So I'll give you an example. Weather. As soon as I know when the National Weather Service is basically giving us we're going to get something significant, we'll start posting something online for the residents, where to get sand, and then we'll also have staff ready to go, who's going to respond, what we're going to do, put things in place. So.
A lot of people see stuff on the news and they see disaster response. I don't think they really understand how it happens. And then, in the end, they say, oh, FEMA shows up. Right. So Ralph, can you just sort of talk from the local level and explain how it works its way up?
So how it works is, obviously we have a disaster out in place. We have our first responders responding to it, whether it's law, fire. They're commanding it out in the field. The second they start commanding it, and it gets to a point where they're running out of resources, there's a threshold that they have. They'll let us know, us in the city, myself, and along with the EOC director, which would be the city manager, assistant city manager. Once we get to a point where we're not able to support and we need the extra help, because we don't want to deplete everything that we have here in the city, obviously. We got day-to-day operations. So then we reach out to the county, we reach out to our neighboring cities, mutual aid, and if it gets to a point where the county's not able to help out, then we definitely look for state resources from the state. Depending on what the state level, it could actually go to a federal declaration. The other way it could go to a federal declaration, if there is a federal land or something to do with the federal government that's actually critical infrastructure that would be impacted, then it would go to national level.
Now tell us about the importance of the residents getting involved when it comes down to emergency services and how we can prepare better.
So that's one of the key things that I have is basically CERT, is community emergency response training that I have for the residents, which I have one coming up February 28th, March 1st and 2nd. Please register. It's a free 20-hour course, and it's situation awareness, how to be prepared, how to build a kit, how to have a plan in place. And we talk about fire suppression, basically also how to stop bleeding, basic medical ops. We're not talking first aid. We're just saying, how to stabilize a broken bone, and then just situations as far as how to identify hazards within your home, work, and your neighborhood. We also do, for that training, damage assessment, very, very basic damage assessment onto if you should be able to go into your home or not. We do talk about active shooter and terrorism, but mainly it's all situation awareness. After the classroom setting, I do have a disaster scenario so we can exercise everything that they learn and then give them the certificate at the end. That basically prepares them on what to do, how to do things, and what we do as emergency response, law enforcement and emergency management.
And with that segue, I'm going to turn over to Captain Rails. And Captain Rails, the importance of the collaboration that the Sheriff's Department has with fire and city during these emergencies.
Yes, we work together well. Normally what happens is when there's a critical incident, fire, flood, mobile field force if we have some type of uprising that we need to deal with. Usually what happens is we establish a command post. That's usually done by either fire or police, sheriff's department, or vice versa. We work together and find a location. Sometimes it moves when we need it to be larger. Usually what we do is we set up a command post. There's incident commanders at that command post, and there's usually an incident commander for fire, incident commander for the sheriff's department. Ralph would be incident commander for the city, the county, same way. And what we do is we have a unified command, and we make sure that we're unified at the top, and that all information starts there. We work it out, and then it's down to our troops.
Recently, Brian, you can agree with me on this. We had devastation in Southern California. Everything from the Palisades fire, including over in Altadena. Now there, we saw chaos. I would say at its best, because you had everything from rioters to faulty communication coming in to alert people about the fires. In your realm, how'd you look at this whole incident?
Well, first of all, I think this was the perfect sort of scenario for a disaster. It's dry. We're late for our rainy season, so we're still in fire season. We have Santa Ana winds and things happen. So I want to caution, sort of pointing the blame here. But overall, I think that here in Riverside County, so I know we have that over there, but in Riverside County, I think the city of Lake Elsinore is in a unique position. So we contract with the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department is large. We contract with CAL FIRE. They're large. So things happen really fast in Lake Elsinore. So where other people have to request resources, it happens almost automatically here. Again, our chief has the ability to pull the whole resources of the sheriff's department at any given time, and just like our fire chief has the same ability to pull fire into the city. I think there are some lessons that can be learned from that. We're studying them. We're watching what's going on. But I think the folks on the ground, they did their job. Removing politics from it. Overall, I just think it was just sort of a bad timing and weather conditions and everything else that contributed to that.
Captain, we saw a lot of rioters, a lot of arrests in LA County. When I go back to the stats of the Holy Fire, obviously the fire here was a little bit, significantly smaller, but you guys did, lock this place down really well.
Yes.
Tell us about those, the different scenarios and maybe what worked for you guys here.
Yeah. After the evacuations and the fire, I mean, there's nobody there in their residences. So obviously there's those individuals out there that come and take advantage of that, and they try to loot and burglarize houses and thefts on property. What we normally do is we lock down every street going into that area to make sure that nobody can drive in. If they do, they're going off road, and then we're usually catching them with one of the air units, so we know that they're coming in. And then we have teams set up in specific neighborhoods and areas to make sure that they're watching for anybody suspicious, anybody driving through. They're checking residents to see if licenses, to make sure they live there. And we really saturate the areas and just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until we can get the people back in there.
Now, the importance of Ralph's job is to make sure that the city is in communication with the outside agencies. Go a little bit more in depth in that. How does that work, and how do you bring all these teams together?
So like I mentioned before, depending on the incident, whether it's law driving it or fire, that's who my first communication is going to be with. It's either going to be with Captain Rail's team or Chief Reed's team, just to find out what the situation is and what they need from us. Once I get that information, then that's basically when I get with the EOC director, which would be the city manager or the assistant city manager. And then we'll basically make the call as to what level our emergency operations center is going to be, and then what we need to put in place and who we need to call in. So if chief or captain are basically asking for a shelter and evacuation routes, then that's basically my role to establish that and get that going, and then get our team going as well. And if it gets to a point where we, the city, are not able to suffice that, then that's basically where I reached out to the county and EMD to try to get those parts moving as well.
Now, the county plays a big role when it comes to emergency services, especially when the alerts go out.
Yes.
A lot of the alerts come through emergency, the emergency management section of the county. Tell us a little bit on how that works. Who gets the notifications? How can they get the notifications, or how can they apply for it?
So within the emergency response within the county, so the emergency management department has duty officers throughout the county, servicing all this, broken down into the supervisor districts. When there's something that comes up, management's alerted, and then we start looking at what we need to do. So, for example, if there was an event here in Lake Elsinore, either Ralph would have contacted us, or we have contacted him and say, this is what we know. We share information, and then if they activate their emergency operations center, then at some level, the county will activate their emergency operations center too. That means when things start happening, we can quickly start coordinating resources and providing resources. I do want to say this. We talk a lot about other people coming in and whatever. So I want people of Lake Elsinore, the buck stops here. Every disaster is local. We're responsible for the disaster. So I don't care what resources come into the city, we have command of it. So if Captain Rails is running the show, he doesn't lose his authority because the National Guard comes in and whatever. He is the incident commander and he runs the incident. So again, I want everyone to know that. That's why we plan. That's why we're talking about this. This is why we have an emergency operations center. The buck stops here. We're responsible for the citizens of Lake Elsinore. And there's times that we can't do it by ourselves, but when we bring in resources, we coordinate those resources, we put them in place, and we run the operations.
Now, that's fantastic information. Now, but in depth, and this is going to be for everyone. I think it's important for residents and those that are watching this podcast understand what triggers an EOC activation or a collaboration. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it can be everything from a mass casualty incident, correct? Shooting, earthquake, anything like that. But I'm going to let the experts that have worked here discuss. We'll start with you, Captain.
Yeah, any of those, anything could be, a mass casualty incident or a critical incident. And then we kind of get together and decide on, hey, are we going to open this up to EOC? Ralph and I will get together with the city managers and decide, if at what level we need to open it up. And like I said, we'll set up a command post. We bring in our Sheriff's Emergency Response Team. They're experts in this, and I know you guys work well with them. Ralph works well with them also. They're kind of a conduit for all information. And whenever we have a critical incident, they respond right to the command post and start coordinating. But yeah, any of those incidents can turn into a major incident quickly.
Any other examples?
Well, I think, again, it's the difference between the day-to-day operations. So unfortunately, there are things that happen every day that don't rise to the occasion where we need additional resources. And I think that's what it sort of boils down to. If an engine can respond to a scene and deal with it, then obviously there wouldn't be an activation. But once things get really large, so if it's a large fire, it's going to require additional resources. There's going to be evacuations, and we start looking at activating our emergency operations center so we can coordinate all of those people. And there are a lot of players in this. There's a lot of county departments that get involved in it. There's a lot of nonprofits like the Red Cross and what we call VOAD, Volunteers Active in Disaster, that get involved in the response. So it just really sort of depends on the event. And what level it is, and when we decide that we need to activate.
Now, there was a few questions floating around during the Holy fire, the Holy and the airport fire, regarding shelters. Shelters, they're like, why is there a shelter in Elsinore High School when it's in Wildomar, but, the incident's happening here? Can we somehow explain why these activations happen in certain points of the city?
Well, I think the shelter piece of it. So again, we want to make sure that when we open a shelter, we're not moving people twice. So we want them. So again, if we evacuate an area and then we look at shelters, and we have agreements with all the school systems, mostly with high schools, to set up shelters in high schools. So we want people far enough away from the fire or the disaster so they're not impacted and have to move twice. So again, it might be in Lake Elsinore, but it could be, like you said, in Wildomar, where we would actually set up the shelter.
Now, Ralph, when it comes down to these activations, based on the evacuations, that's how you determine size of facilities and things like that. How does that work?
Basically on the area, the information I get from the incident commander, law and fire, will determine on where we're going to activate. And then that actually determines too where our shelter is going to be at, because we don't want the shelter to be anywhere near the incident. We want it to be in a safe area as well. So that could probably prompt up, bringing in 2 activations of a shelter versus 1. And then just piggybacking on what the mayor was saying, if the incident's here, we own it. We're basically in charge and taking over and taking full control of the incident in a unified command, possibly bringing all the resources in. But at the same time, we're constantly communicating and making sure, with law and fire, that everything's, being done and they're getting the support that they need from us.
We always get this from pretty much all public agencies, public safety agencies, when they also say it's up to the residents to also be prepared, because when it comes down to the moment's notice that you must evacuate, you don't have luxury, correct, to just stay there and kind of ignore it. Ralph, tell us, why is it important for the residents to be ready as much as the leaders of this community?
It's extremely important. The Palisades, and just, the numerous fires that we've had is a perfect example. We can replace a home, we can replace a vehicle, material stuff, but we cannot replace life. And even though sometimes, I know during the Holy Flood, we constantly had, or before it came up to it, we constantly had evacuations, warnings coming, because we were getting rain. But it's extremely important to take them serious at all times, just because you just don't know. We are just preparing just to make sure, because we're not 100% sure what Mother Nature can actually do, right? It might say something on the radar, but it could actually do something else. It can make, we were supposed to get Hurricane Hillary hit, Lake Elsinore, and it curved and it went to the desert. So we prepare as much as we possibly can. We send out those alerts, and make sure that they're always ready. So that's why we say, take into consideration, have a plan in place. Warnings come out, they're very serious. So,
Captain, you guys deal with this a lot. There's, when evacuations order happen, you guys are the first ones on the front lines removing, well, we shouldn't say removing, but requesting for people to leave.
Yes.
A lot of people don't understand that it's not your obligation to push them out of there and say, hey, you got to go. You alert them, you tell them, hey, this is happening. But what are the do's and don'ts that you want these individuals to know? But furthermore, I want you to tell us what's lawful and what's not when it comes down to an evacuation.
Yeah, when we come out and we do immediate evacuations, telling you need to leave now. If we're on the speaker system telling you need to leave, you need to leave, because usually we're there, right before a fire's going to hit or a flood's going to hit. And a flood, normally you don't have that. You don't have ahead of time information as far as if it's going to come. But let's take the airport fire for instance. We knew it was coming this way. Most everybody was not ready because we did not think it was moving that quickly. We had about an hour and a half's notice to, hey, we got to start immediate evacuations. It takes a little bit of time to get teams together and get them up on Ortega Mountain there, El Carrizo area, to start knocking on every door. So luckily we had teams here during the day. We had immediate response, and we started bringing in resources from neighboring stations with the sheriff's department. But as far as do's and don'ts, when it says evacuation, yes, you should evacuate immediately. Not everybody does. We can't put handcuffs on you and pull you out of the house. That's not a thing anymore. So we will talk to you. We will make sure that, hey, you know what could happen if you don't leave. A lot of people say, okay, I got to get my stuff together, I'm leaving. And what we do is the deputies, when they go to residents, they'll tell dispatch the location. They'll let them know before they leave. They'll tell dispatch that everyone was removed from the house or has left. If not, then if someone stays behind, we give their name, date of birth, so that our dispatch can go back and say, okay, if that fire hits, we've got to make sure we try to contact that person. We'll get a phone number. But we go to every residence and knock on doors and make sure those residents are tagged so that we don't have to go back. But as far as the law goes, you have a right to stay in your house if you want to. You do not have to leave, but you should.
And Brian, right now at this point in time, people have to understand too, when law enforcement and fire goes in there and you disobey the orders of evacuation, now you're not putting yourself in danger, but you're now hindering, from them doing their job, and also potentially having them get injured too, because they're gonna, even though they say they're not gonna, push you to get out, they're human beings. They're going to care for you and they're going to want you to get out. So now you're jeopardizing their life as well.
Absolutely. Our folks are dedicated. And if they know there's someone that didn't leave a house and fire's coming their way, they're going to go back. And again, now you're separating resources, pulling things. I do want to go back a little bit though, because before the sheriff knocks on your door, there's two things that happen. One, there's this thing called an evacuation warning. We're alerting people ahead of time, and we do this through the cell phone system. So we'll send out an alert, and this is what the county can do. We'll send out an alert warning people that there's a possible evacuation of their area. That's the time when people should be packing their stuff, making sure they have stuff for their kids, their pets, medications, clothes, documents, and all those things. And then there's the evacuation order. That means get out. And so usually right after the evacuation order, now you have our sheriff's department knocking on doors telling people, or on the broadcast telling people, get out of the area. So usually, again, there are times where we don't have a lot of time. It might not necessarily have, an hour or 2 hours. But when you hear that evacuation warning, you need to listen and you need to start preparing. So,
Ralph, how many, we see a lot of injuries and a lot of unfortunate situations because people don't want to evacuate. I still speak to a lot of colleagues that I have in the news industry in LA, and they say that a lot of the fatalities at the Eaton fire were because they disobeyed those orders, thinking that the fire was not going to approach them because it was literally 6.5 miles from the starting point.
I couldn't say how many, but I mean, there's numerous incidents that's actually happened. And just like the mayor was saying, the incident command post fire, they've got a plan already. They know where the fire's going. They're setting that plan in. Once, sheriff department goes out there and they're knocking on your door telling you to leave and it's time to go, and you don't leave and you stay there, well, you're throwing in, a little wrench into their plan as to try to fight the fire, because they got to come back. And they're going to try to do everything possible to try to save you, knowing that you're in there. So, but you're also putting them in jeopardy as well, just like the mayor has said. So there's two things that, you got to take into consideration. One is your life, and then also you're putting those first responders who are trying to save you in jeopardy as well.
So there's a couple other pieces too that we need to look at. So again, I know in those fires, there were people that refused to leave their homes, but there were also people that couldn't leave their homes. And so it's important that we register people that, that can't, or that are, either on oxygen or bedridden or those other things, so that we know. And then when that information gets relayed to the sheriff's department, and they can go in and actually evacuate or help evacuate those people. So those are the people that we're really concerned with. Again, adults are adults, they're given a warning. They got a knock on the door. If they choose not to leave, it's unfortunate. But we want to also make sure that the people that can't leave for some physical ailment, that we can go in, we can identify them. So, one of the things, that message we want to get across is make sure that we know they have some way of contacting or talking to family members or someone that can relay information back during an emergency, that there's someone that can't get out of a house in a flood or a fire or earthquake or whatever. And then that way we can go in and target those areas.
Now, your initiative this year, and the slogan is Dream Bold. It's a pretty powerful statement, if you will, when you say Dream Bold. What does that mean to this year's mayorship and emergency preparedness, along with everything that you have set for this year?
Well, again, we have come a long way in the city of Lake Elsinore over the last 15 years. And, we're doing a lot of great things. And part of it is making sure that we have adequate resources, which we've done a great job making sure that, our sheriff's department has the resources they need to deal with crime and other stuff. Our fire department is adequate to meet the needs and have a good response time. We have an emergency operations center that will activate, that can coordinate all of those things when a disaster occurs. So we want the residents to understand that we, as Lake Elsinoreans, have to work together, be bold, and that also means being prepared. So again, and maybe Ralph can share where they can go to get information, because we talked a lot about the sort of emergency response and pieces like that, but there's some stuff they can do ahead of time to make sure that they're prepared. And that's where we need them to be bold.
Absolutely. How do people get educated and sign up for the different resources we have, Ralph?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I do have the CERT class that's actually coming up on February 20th.
And what are the dates?
February 28th, March 1st and 2nd. It is, again, a 20-hour course. So we started off with a Friday night from 5 to 9, all day Saturday and Sunday from 8 to 5. And like I said, it's a lot of information, good information, but it does teach you how to prepare. Teens, I'm always asked about teens, and you're more than welcome to bring your teens with you. And I don't turn that down at all, just as long as they're accompanied with an adult or their parent. And they'll learn information there on how to be prepared, how to make a little simple plan, how to work as a team within your neighborhood, your neighbors, your work, or just even your family itself. Have a plan in place, have that emergency contacts, have that emergency kit, and then just being prepared with basic medical ops and just situation awareness. And the other thing too, how to build a plan. I do have that in our website. If you do go to the Lake Elsinore under the departments, under emergency services and public safety, you'll go into the emergency service department and you'll see how to build a kit. And then also our CERT classes are there as well.
Now, Ralph, and actually, Mayor, when it comes down again, can people register for these alerts that they get from the city? From the county when it comes down to emergencies, or is that something natural? If you have a cell phone, you're going to get an alert. Is that true?
So that's kind of an automatic.
Okay.
So the cell phones are an automatic, but there are places and that they can go to. So the county has a site, ready.org, that folks can go to, ready.org. The federal government has a site, ready.gov. They can reach out actually to the electrical company. So that's another area, especially where people that, for example, need oxygen, because if the power shut off, they need to know this. So the Edison actually has a link where they can register to let them know that there's, they need power because they have equipment and stuff that depends on their lives. So those are some of the things they can do. But yeah, so the initial alert though is based on cell phones, and that's automatic. Unfortunately, we still have folks that don't have cell phones, or there might be in some of the rural areas again. But what we need is, again, people in Lake Elsinore to be bold and to let their residents know that to call them or to let somebody know if they're not getting alerts and be prepared.
Now, this is going to be a question out of the outfield, but I think it's important. Emergency services or a major disaster and the communication to the public, social media. We understand that social media at one point was our best friend to get information out. Now it's oversaturated, and then you have keyboard warriors going in there and putting what they think is happening. A lot of this can cause mayhem, chaos, and confusion when it comes down to a disaster. How important, Ralph, is the communication line between residents and the emergency operations, management team, so people are informed?
It's extremely important. So following our city page, our web, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or even on our website, we might have a banner, basically depending on the incident, on where to go to shelter, evacuation routes and whatnot. And then also how to register to Alert Rivco, just so you can get those alerts if you're not registered as well. So
Now the information can be distorted from other agencies, not other agencies, but other people that are communicating with the public.
correct. And so airport fire, perfect example. Fire didn't come into the city, but we did get the warnings just because, like Captain said, the fire was getting very, very close. And that's one of the reasons that prompt those warnings out. So with that being said, we as a city started pushing out information that was coming from CAL FIRE, PIO, along with ours.
So now, Brian, when that information is disseminated, it's important for people to understand that just because you're not receiving the information immediately, it doesn't mean we don't know what we're doing, correct?
Well, that's correct. And it's unfortunate. If somebody's standing on the street corner and they see a fire and they want to report it, we can't keep up with, how fast someone puts information out there. The key is to go to the actual source. Make sure that they go to the Lake Elsinore page or the county's page, and they look at the actual source where they can get information. And our duty is to make sure that we post that as quickly as possible so people have the right information.
Captain, the Sheriff's Department has a great team of a great media team. When the information is coming down, explain how do they get the communication? So it comes from the command post to them, and then them to the public. Can you explain how that?
Yes, it does, but we also need to think that all the different agencies and the government agencies have to make sure they have one line of communication, make sure there's not dueling posts. So what we normally do is we'll get together with the city, PIO with the city, PIO with the school district, PIO with the sheriff's office, and we make sure they talk so that they're putting out the same message, so there's not different messaging. I think every station, fire department, every sheriff's station, the city all have Facebook posts and Instagram. So we got to make sure. Normally, what I do is I'll contact the city, and if they've already done a post, then we'll tag it. Make sure we tag it so that someone goes onto our site, that they see the same message, so we're not having dueling messages.
Ralph, take us through the process. So how is the information disseminated once it gets to you?
So I get it as soon as the incident commander is actually getting ready to release, because obviously everything has to be vetted and okayed and approved by them. So as soon as they get it and they put it to their PIOs, we all basically grab that information and then we disseminate it. Or we'll be tagged on it, or we'll just, repost on what they posted themselves as well. But then we'll grab it and then we'll put it on our website as well.
One of the things the county helps is if it's a local event, then obviously here with the sheriff's department and with the city, they can disseminate the information. But when it's a larger event and the county activates its emergency operations center, then we also set up a joint information center where all the PIOs are talking together and sharing the information. And that way it's clear what's coming out of everybody speaking the same language. So there's not someone that's given information that's different than what we want put out.
And I have to throw this out there because I just learned it, but that's called the JIC.
That's called the JIC.
Yeah, see,
and we try not to. We're trying not to throw out too many, sort of government and acronyms and stuff out there. But yeah, that's called the JIC, and that is a very important function in emergency response. Yeah. Again, and like I said, we all have PIOs. There's PIOs all over the place. There's departments within the county that have their own PIOs. But again, when the EOC is activated, when the county EOC is activated, and we're activated because others need help, then everything goes through the JIC. So.
For those that don't understand the difference between mutual aid and an operation EOC activation, some would say they're similar but not the same. Would you agree?
Well, I think what people need to understand, so like a lot of mutual aid doesn't necessarily happen within the city. Again, I explained, we have a sheriff's department, and so how many cities do you contract with?
Roughly a dozen.
Yeah, so we don't need an actual mutual aid is when you give sort of mutual service. So I give to you, you give me the same sort of thing, right? So this is sort of automatic aid, and it happens with the fire department because I think our CAL FIRE services about 16 of our cities, 16 or 18 of our cities, and so it's an automatic thing. Now, when CAL FIRE, for example, needs additional resources, so the city of Murrieta has their own fire department. So this is where mutual aid comes to play. The city of Murrieta also has their own police department. So if the sheriff's department needs assistance, this is mutual aid, and it works both ways. So the sheriff actually works very closely with the city of Murrieta, using them as an example. That's what mutual aid is. But again, we are very fortunate that we have probably the largest sheriff's department in the state. I think
One of the largest.
one of the largest in the state. And then, of course, CAL FIRE is the state fire agency, which is the largest in the state, which we are the, one of the largest partners. And we have a very large fire department here. So a lot of stuff happens. It's just like during these last fires, I think 25 strike teams, was it 25 or 5 strike teams? I don't remember what the number was. 25 engines or so went to assist out.
25, yes,
This
they were
doesn't even impact us because we have engines in reserve, we have people in reserve, and so everything just continues to happen. And that happens all over the place. And so that's a little bit of mutual aid because LA Fire was leading it. So CAL FIRE supported, that's a mutual aid piece of it. But for us, mostly it's automatic aid here in Riverside County. Again, with the exception of our cities that have their own law and fire department. And there's only a few of them. It's Riverside, Corona,
Murrieta, right?
Palm Springs, and I'm missing a couple, but most of the cities either contract with the sheriff's department or CAL FIRE. And again, that helps us because it's the power of this large organization that can descend without, all they have to do is call on the radio and say, I need more engines. And then you have 30 engines in Lake Elsinore. But when you have to do mutual aid, it's a whole different scenario.
So we're going to wrap it up here, but before we wrap it up, I'm going to give you lightning round questions, right? No, Ralph, we did touch a little bit on this, but how can residents stay well informed when it comes down to an emergency or any preparedness class you provide?
Again, just going to our website, go to the departments, go under public safety and emergency services, and you will see our classes will be to register there. It's an easy click on the link and then it'll send you to our application. If not, you can just go ahead and email us or just follow us on social media, which is the city Facebook, Instagram, and I believe X as well. So yeah, and then you can get my information also on the website and just email me and I can get you registered. And any help as far as just simple plan, emergency plan, fire plan, evacuation plan. So,
Captain Rails, how can the community support you guys to make your jobs easier during a natural disaster or evacuation?
Yeah. Well, like what Ralph said, have a plan in place, ready to go. Have a go bag with all of your important documents. Know where all of your family heirlooms and things like that are, because you'll want to take those for, because looters do get into houses. I mean, we're not going to keep everybody out. We try, but I mean, it does happen. So just make sure you're ready to go and can move quickly.
Right.
Well, and I think the other thing is the importance of people knowing that in a disaster, calling 911 probably is not necessarily the right answer because again, there's, resources are tied up. We still want people, if they're, those true emergencies that impact individuals, they call 911. But again, I think the key is following the city on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and just being prepared. Again, there's resources, ready.gov is a federal resource that tells you how to do disaster planning. Ready Rivco, again, tells us what to do in the county, how to sign up for the alerts and stuff like that. And it's just the general preparedness. And so, there used to be, we used to tell people to be 3 days prepared. I think now we really want people to be 10 days. We know that's not practical for everyone, but you should have food and water, and you should have some type of kit that you can quickly assemble if you have to evacuate. And again, remember your kids, medications, pets, and pets also have needs too. Some have medications and those other things. So you have to make sure that you look at all those things for your families.
One other thing that comes to mind, if your kids are at school and you're at work, there has to be some sort of meeting point somewhere for them to know if you guys are if you guys are not able to locate yourselves. What would you call that? A location for a meeting point?
Meeting point's probably the good term. So you should tell your family members if they're not at home, where to meet if there's a disaster. If the kids are at school, though, the schools will notify parents because, for example, if there's an event that really happens at school, we don't want parents to descend on school. There's going to be fire or law activity, and we don't want to create an additional event on top of it. And Captain Rails will probably...
Yeah, most likely you're not going to be able to get into the area. Yeah. We're going to have the streets cordoned off. We recently had that at Lewis Samuel Elementary School in Temescal Valley, where we had a fire there and we had to evacuate the entire school. And that school was, we worked with the school district. Buses were brought in. All those children were taken to Temescal High School. And the school district's really good about pushing that information out to parents to respond to this location. They have it on cell phones, so they get immediate notifications, and then they go to that location rather than showing up at the school.
They have a reunification plan. All schools do. So they have a plan in place in case a disaster were to happen, what to do in school. So that's one thing parents should know that, and how to get to where to get those kids to their parents and where. So that's something that they probably need to have a conversation with, but they do have that information already in place.
Yeah, and then one more thing real quick too, just on what we were talking about earlier. As far as calling 911, 911 is for emergencies, life and death. You call if something's happening to where you need police there now. We do have dispatchers that answer non-emergency lines, and that is 951-776-1099-1099. And you might have to wait a few minutes sometimes if there's an emergency going on, but you can get a lot of information just by calling that non-emergency line, and then you're not tying up 911.
Those are all great tips, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Any closing thoughts, Brian?
Well, again, we want Lake Elsinore to be bold, but we also want them to be safe also. So, and I want to thank you for putting this together, and thank you for our guests that are here speaking about emergency management.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the topic today. We hope you've learned something, and if you haven't, then I don't know what to tell you. So thank you so much. Dream bold, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next month with another segment and more topics that you want to know about. Thank you so much.